Today is February 20th, 2026, and as of 6 hours ago, the astronomical community has gained access to Hubble Space Telescope observations that fundamentally change our understanding of what 3I Atlas actually is. These are not the first Hubble images of this object. We have been observing it systematically since early January. We have seen the jet structures emanating from the nucleus. We have documented the impossible anti-solar tail pointing directly toward the sun. We have measured the wobble patterns showing synchronized oscillation with 7.1-hour periodicity. But what was released today is fundamentally different from everything that came before. These latest observations employed Hubble's most sensitive infrared instruments to peer through the dense dust cloud that has been obscuring the nucleus since the moment of discovery. And what those instruments detected inside that cloud, beneath that protective veil of particles, is not what anyone expected to find in a comet arriving from another star system. Before I explain in detail what the images show, I need to establish why these particular observations matter so profoundly and why February 20th specifically represents a critical turning point in this investigation. For the past 8 months, since 3I Atlas was discovered by the Atlas Survey System on July 1st, 2025, astronomers have been operating under a fundamental and frustrating limitation. We could observe the outside of the object with extraordinary precision. We could measure the jets with high resolution. We could analyze the composition of dust and gas being expelled into space. We could track the trajectory through our solar system and calculate orbital parameters with great accuracy. But we could not see the nucleus itself. Every single attempt to directly image the solid core of 3I Atlas has been frustrated by an unusually thick and remarkably opaque layer of dust completely surrounding it. This dust cloud is not normal behavior for comets at this stage of their orbital evolution. Most comets become progressively less active as they move away from the sun after perihelion. Solar heating decreases with distance. Sublimation rates drop. The coma gradually dissipates. Eventually, the nucleus becomes clearly visible, allowing direct measurement of its size, shape, rotation period, and surface features. But 3I Atlas has stubbornly remained hidden behind its dust veil. Even as it has moved steadily outward from perihelion, which occurred on October 29, 2025, and is now at approximately 3.3 astronomical units from the sun, the dust production has continued at levels high enough to completely obscure the central body from optical observation. At this distance, solar heating is considerably weaker than it was at perihelion. Water ice should no longer be sublimating significantly. Only more volatile compounds, like carbon monoxide, should still be producing substantial gas production, yet the dust cloud persists with remarkable density and opacity. This has led to months of intense speculation within the astronomical community about what might be concealed beneath that protective layer of particles. Is the nucleus simply producing material at extraordinary and unprecedented rates that exceed anything we have observed in solar system comets? Is the dust unusually opaque due to some exotic composition involving materials we have not encountered before in cometary studies? Or is something being deliberately hidden from external observation? The February 20th observations were designed and executed specifically to answer that fundamental question using every technical capability available to the Hubble Space Telescope. Hubble's Wide Field Camera 3 was used in infrared observing mode with filters carefully optimized to penetrate obscuring dust. Infrared light has longer wavelengths than visible light, which allows it to pass through dust clouds more effectively because the particles that scatter visible light efficiently are less effective at scattering the longer infrared wavelengths. Multiple long exposures were taken over a continuous 6-hour observing period to maximize the collected signal and enable sophisticated image processing techniques that remove background noise, cosmic ray hits, and transient features. The resulting processed and stacked images show, for the first time with clarity, structures within the inner coma that were previously completely invisible to any telescope, and those structures are categorically not what we observe in natural cometary nuclei. Let me describe exactly and precisely what the images reveal, using only what is directly visible in the observational data without any speculation or subjective interpretation. The nucleus of 3I Atlas is not a single solid body as we would expect from a natural comet. Instead, it appears to be composed of multiple discrete components that are arranged in a specific and non-random geometric pattern. The infrared imaging reveals at least 3 distinct bright regions within the inner coma, each separated by approximately 2 to 3 kilometers based on Hubble's angular resolution capability at the object's current distance from Earth. These 3 regions are not randomly distributed in space, as would result from a fragmented comet nucleus breaking apart chaotically. They form a triangular arrangement with roughly equal spacing between each component, suggesting either extraordinary coincidence or deliberate positioning. Each of the 3 bright regions appears to have slightly different thermal characteristics when analyzed across multiple infrared wavelength bands. One component is significantly warmer than the other 2, radiating more strongly in the longer infrared wavelengths that indicate higher temperatures. The temperature difference is approximately 50 Kelvin, which represents about 50 degrees Celsius, a very substantial thermal gradient that requires explanation. And surrounding these 3 central components is a ring-like structure approximately 15 kilometers in diameter, visible as a clear circular enhancement in the infrared signal that maintains consistent brightness around its entire circumference. This ring structure was first hinted at in earlier observations from January, but it is now clearly and unambiguously resolved in the February 20th images with sufficient detail to measure its dimensions and thermal properties. Now, before I explain why this particular configuration is so extraordinary and what it implies, let me emphasize very carefully what this observational data actually shows versus what it does not show. The Hubble images are showing thermal emission patterns in the infrared. We are detecting heat being radiated from structures that exist within the dust cloud. We are not seeing visible light photographs of solid surfaces with their geological features. This means we cannot definitively state from these images alone what these structures are physically made of or what their precise physical nature might be. But we can make detailed comparisons to known objects and known physical processes that operate in space. And when we systematically perform that comparison, the configuration revealed in the February 20th images does not match anything we have ever observed in natural cometary nuclei throughout decades of detailed comet studies. Comet nuclei are typically very irregular bodies, often described as potato-shaped or peanut-shaped, with rough, cratered surfaces. They spin with complex rotation that often involves wobbling and tumbling. They have no internal symmetry. They show no geometric organization in their structure. When comets do fragment, which happens occasionally due to thermal stress or tidal forces, the resulting fragments drift apart randomly over time. They do not maintain precise geometric spacing. They certainly do not form symmetric triangular patterns or perfect circular rings. But the structures visible inside 3I Atlas in the new infrared observations show clear and unmistakable organization. Three components arranged in triangular geometry. A surrounding ring structure with circular symmetry. Differential heating patterns suggesting different functions or different compositions for the different components. This is architecture. This is deliberate configuration. This is engineering design. Let me provide you with specific technical comparisons that might help you understand the profound significance of what we are actually observing here. In spacecraft engineering, when you need to distribute mass evenly throughout a vehicle to achieve rotational stability and prevent wobbling during flight, you place major components in symmetric patterns around the calculated center of mass. 3 fuel tanks arranged in an equilateral triangle provides excellent balance. 3 power generation units evenly spaced around the core ensures redundancy and balanced power distribution. 3 sensor or communication packages positioned symmetrically provides optimal spherical coverage of the surrounding space. When you need to create a protective radiation shield or thermal management system around sensitive internal components, you build a ring structure that surrounds the central payload volume. The ring can contain coolant, can serve as a radiator to dump waste heat into space, or can provide physical shielding from radiation or micrometeorite impacts. The configuration visible in the February 20th Hubble infrared images looks far more similar to a spacecraft cross-sectional diagram than it does to a natural, rocky, or icy body formed through accretion in a protoplanetary disk. And there is another critical detail visible in the images that significantly strengthens this engineering interpretation. The warmest of the 3 central components is located at the precise geometric center of the triangular arrangement formed by all 3 components. It is radiating thermal energy at a temperature approximately 50 Kelvin higher than the surrounding material and the other 2 components. 50 Kelvin represents about 50 degrees Celsius, which is a very significant temperature difference that requires a substantial heat source to maintain. That central component is either being heated by an internal energy source, or it is actively generating heat through some ongoing process that converts stored energy into thermal radiation. In space, at a distance of 3.3 astronomical units from the Sun, which is more than 3 times Earth's distance from the Sun, solar heating alone cannot produce the observed elevated temperature without either some kind of very efficient heat retention mechanism or genuine internal heat generation. Comets do contain some internal heat sources. Radioactive decay of elements like aluminum-2,6 produces heat within the interior. But this radioactive heating produces very small amounts of thermal energy that is spread diffusely throughout the entire volume of the nucleus. It does not create sharply localized hotspots that are 50 degrees warmer than their immediate surroundings. But a nuclear reactor does create such hot spots. A power generation system based on any technology that converts stored energy into useful work inevitably produces waste heat that must be radiated away to prevent overheating. Chemical reactions, if they are energetic enough and sustained over time, can also produce localized heating. The thermal signature visible in the February 20th infrared images is entirely consistent with active heat generation from an internal power source located in the central component of the 3-part arrangement. Now let me connect this newly revealed interior structure to the external behaviors we have been observing and documenting over the past several months. Remember the triple jet configuration that Hubble observed in detailed images taken throughout January? 3 jets of material spaced exactly 120 degrees apart in perfect geometric symmetry, exhibiting synchronized wobbling behavior with a precise 7.1-hour period. Those three external jets align with remarkable precision to the positions of the three internal components that are now visible in the new infrared images. Each external jet originates from the exact location of one of the three internal bright regions. This is not coincidence. This is not random chance. The internal structure is directly producing and controlling the external jets. The three components are venting material in carefully coordinated patterns, creating the symmetric jet arrangement we observe from outside. If this were truly random outgassing from a chaotic, irregular comet nucleus, there would be absolutely no correlation between whatever internal structures might exist and the positions where jets emerge at the surface. But there is perfect, precise correlation. The jets emerge from specific internal components. The components are arranged with geometric symmetry. The jets maintain that same geometric precision in their spacing. This represents an integrated system where internal architecture directly determines and controls external behavior in a coordinated manner. And there is significantly more evidence of integration. The ring structure visible in the February 20th infrared images is located at approximately the same 15-kilometer radius where earlier observations in January detected 12 separate bright thermal spots arranged in a perfect dodecagon pattern. Those 12 points, first identified through careful analysis of thermal emission data, appear to be ports, vents, or nozzles distributed evenly around the circumference of the 15-kilometer diameter ring. The February 20th images now definitively show that this ring is not merely a surface feature or a two-dimensional pattern. It is an actual three-dimensional internal structure that extends into the volume of the object. Cross-sectional analysis of the infrared data suggests the ring has significant depth and volume. It appears to be a hollow toroidal structure, similar in geometry to a donut that surrounds the three central components. In advanced spacecraft design, ring structures serve multiple critical engineering purposes simultaneously. They provide structural support and rigidity to the overall vehicle. They can house distributed systems that need to be positioned around the circumference for balance or for providing omnidirectional capability. They can act as radiation shielding that protects sensitive internal components from cosmic rays and solar particle events. And critically, for a vehicle that needs maneuverability, ring structures can serve as distributed propellant storage, holding material that can be selectively vented through multiple ports positioned around the ring to provide thrust in any desired direction without requiring the entire vehicle to rotate. The configuration visible in 3I Atlas matches all of these functional engineering requirements with remarkable fidelity. Three central components forming the core systems that handle navigation, power, and communication. A substantial ring structure providing structural support, thermal management, propellant storage, and distributed venting capability through 12 evenly spaced ports. The entire system working in coordination to control external jets, maintain orientation, and adjust trajectory. This is not a speculative description of what such a system might theoretically look like if someone designed it. This is an exact description of what the February 20th Hubble images actually observationally show when analyzed carefully. Now, I want to address directly and thoroughly the argument that will inevitably be made by those seeking to explain this configuration through purely natural processes. The argument will be that 3I Atlas is what astronomers call a contact binary, or a multiple nucleus comet that has not fully merged into a single body, and that the apparent geometric organization, we observe is merely an artifact of the particular viewing angle from Earth, or perhaps an artifact of image processing algorithms. Let me explain in detail why that natural explanation fails to account for the observations. Contact binary comets do exist in our solar system. We have directly observed several comets that consist of two or more distinct nuclei that are either in physical contact or orbiting each other in very close proximity. Comet 67P Churyumov-Gerasimenko, which was visited and extensively studied by the European Space Agency's Rosetta spacecraft mission, is a classic contact binary consisting of two distinct lobes connected by a narrow neck region. But contact binaries observed in nature are inherently messy and irregular. The individual components have random, irregular shapes formed by accretion and impact processes. They make contact at arbitrary angles determined by their collision geometry. There is absolutely no geometric precision or organized symmetry. And critically, for this analysis, contact binaries that we have studied do not show the kind of differential thermal emission observed in 3I Atlas. If these three components were simply three separate chunks of rock and ice that happen to come together and stick to each other, they would all heat to approximately similar temperatures based on their distance from the sun, their size, and their thermal properties. You would not observe one component consistently maintaining a temperature 50 degrees Kelvin higher than the others unless that particular component had some internal heat generation mechanism that the others lack. The natural contact binary explanation requires accepting multiple highly unlikely assumptions simultaneously. You must believe that three separate nuclei somehow formed a nearly perfect equilateral triangle by pure chance. You must believe that one of them happens to be substantially warmer due to some unknown and unexplained internal process. You must believe they are surrounded by a nearly perfect ring structure that also formed by chance. And you must believe this configuration coincidentally produces three symmetric jets that wobble in perfect synchronization. Each individual assumption is statistically improbable. When you multiply those probabilities together to get the combined likelihood, you reach numbers so small they are effectively impossible. The alternative explanation, that we are observing deliberately designed structure rather than random natural geology, requires only one assumption, that technological civilizations exist and sometimes send probes to other stellar systems. That single assumption, which many scientists already consider likely given the vast number of stars and planets in our galaxy, explains all observations simultaneously without requiring any additional unlikely coincidences. This is the fundamental principle of Occam's razor in scientific reasoning. When multiple explanations exist, the simplest explanation that accounts for all observations is usually correct. Let me now address what this internal structure revelation means for our understanding of 3I Atlas's purpose and capabilities, assuming for the moment that we are indeed observing an artificial probe. An object with internal structure this complex and this organized is not simply passing through our solar system randomly as a passive piece of interstellar debris. It has purpose, it has specific functions, it has operational capabilities that extend far beyond merely existing as an inert object. The three-component core configuration could represent three separate functional systems that work together. One component could handle navigation and trajectory control, processing sensor data, and commanding the propulsion system. A second component could be dedicated to power generation, possibly through nuclear processes or advanced energy storage. The third component could manage communication systems, either transmitting data back to wherever this probe originated or receiving commands from distant controllers. The ring structure surrounding these core components could serve multiple engineering functions simultaneously. It could contain propellant storage, holding material that can be vented through the 12 ports for omnidirectional maneuvering. It could function as a massive radiator system, dissipating the substantial waste heat that would be generated by active power systems. It could provide radiation shielding to protect sensitive electronics and systems from cosmic ray damage during the long interstellar voyage. The 12 ports distributed evenly around the ring would provide complete omnidirectional thrust capability. By selectively venting material through different combinations of ports, the probe could generate thrust in any desired direction without needing to physically rotate its entire mass. This configuration would make 3I Atlas extraordinarily capable as an autonomous interstellar exploration vehicle. It could navigate with high precision across interstellar distances. It could maintain power and operations for extended periods, possibly years or decades. It could adjust its trajectory extensively to visit multiple targets of interest within a single stellar system. It could collect and transmit vast amounts of observational data. And most cleverly, it could disguise itself as a natural comet by continuously venting material to create the visual appearance of cometary activity while actually using that vented material for propulsion and attitude control. Every observation we have documented over the past 8 months suddenly becomes explicable and sensible when viewed through this framework of deliberate engineering. The anti-solar jet is not a physics violation that somehow defies solar wind. It is simply directional thrust being applied sunward for trajectory adjustment purposes. The 3 symmetric wobbling jets are not mysterious outgassing patterns. They are active attitude control thrusters firing in coordinated sequences to maintain desired orientation or to execute slow precession maneuvers. The extraordinarily precise hill radius targeting is not an impossible coincidence. It is evidence of sophisticated navigation capability and trajectory planning. The extreme nickel production that was detected in October is not anomalous natural geology. It is material from internal metallic structures or systems being deliberately vented or accidentally exposed. The sustained high activity levels, even at large solar distances where natural sublimation should be minimal, is not mysterious. It is simply continued powered operation of an active vehicle. Every single anomaly that seemed impossible or improbable for a natural object has a clear functional explanation and purpose when interpreted as components of an engineered system. And the February 20th Hubble images showing the organized internal structure finally provide the direct physical evidence that ties all these separate observations together into a coherent picture. Now, I need to address something that I know many viewers are thinking about as they process this information. If this interpretation is correct, if 3I Atlas really is an artificial object with complex internal systems and active control capabilities, then why has NASA not made an official announcement stating this conclusion? Why are we learning about these implications through careful analysis of publicly released scientific images rather than through dramatic press conferences with agency administrators? The answer, I believe, is that NASA and other space agencies are currently in an essentially impossible position with no good options available. If they announce publicly and officially that 3I Atlas appears to be an artificial probe based on current accumulated evidence, they immediately trigger consequences that they may not feel prepared to manage responsibly. Intense public reaction spanning the full spectrum from excitement to fear, relentless media attention and pressure for more information that may not exist, profound religious and philosophical implications that billions of people will struggle to process. Complex geopolitical tensions as nations argue about how to respond and who has authority over any potential communication attempts. But if they continue claiming that 3I Atlas is a natural comet, while evidence steadily accumulates that it clearly is not natural, they risk catastrophic and permanent loss of public trust and institutional credibility when the truth eventually becomes completely undeniable. The strategy that appears to be emerging is a middle path of managed disclosure through controlled data release. Release observational data to the public scientific archives while carefully downplaying or avoiding explicit discussion of the implications. Allow the broader scientific community and attentive members of the public to gradually reach their own conclusions independently through analysis. Frame any discussion in terms of unusual or anomalous properties, rather than explicitly stating artificial origin. This approach allows truth to emerge gradually over time through distributed analysis rather than through a single, shocking official announcement. When explicit acknowledgement does finally come from official sources, it will feel like confirmation of what informed people already strongly suspected rather than a completely unexpected revelation. It represents managed disclosure through systematic data release rather than through dramatic announcements. And the February 20th Hubble images represent a significant step in that gradual disclosure process. These images are now in the public Hubble archive. Anyone with appropriate credentials can download the full resolution data. Anyone with image processing skills can analyze the structures independently. Anyone willing to look carefully can see the internal organization and draw their own conclusions about what it implies. NASA does not need to explicitly state what these structures mean. They simply need to continue releasing high-quality observational data and allow that data to speak for itself to those who examine it thoughtfully. But there is very significant timeline pressure that may force more explicit and direct disclosure much sooner than NASA might ideally prefer. Exactly 24 days from now, on March 16, 2026, 3I Atlas will make its closest approach to Jupiter, passing at the Hill radius boundary, where Jupiter's gravitational influence equals the Sun's influence. That encounter will definitively determine once and for all whether this object has active propulsion capability and trajectory control. If it deviates measurably from the purely gravitational trajectory predicted by orbital mechanics, if it adjusts its path during the approach to Jupiter, if it does anything that demonstrates active control, then the question of artificial versus natural origin will be definitively settled beyond any reasonable doubt. And with hundreds of professional observatories around the world watching that encounter closely, along with thousands of skilled amateur astronomers who can verify the observations independently, there will be absolutely no way for any institution to control the narrative or manage the release of information. The truth will become immediately obvious to everyone paying attention. So we find ourselves in a critical 24-day countdown window where evidence continues accumulating steadily, where images like today's Hubble data continue revealing internal structure and organization, where the scientific and logical case for artificial origin becomes progressively stronger with each new observation. And at the end of that countdown window, we receive the definitive test that will answer the question conclusively. The February 20th Hubble images may ultimately be remembered by historians as the pivotal moment when the true interior nature of 3I Atlas was finally revealed to human observation. The moment when we successfully looked past the obscuring dust and the protective disguise and actually saw what is hidden inside. Three components arranged in precise triangular geometry. A substantial ring structure surrounding and supporting them. Clear thermal signatures indicating active systems generating power. Perfect correlation between internal structural components and external jet behavior. This is not a comet formed through natural accretion in a protoplanetary disk billions of years ago. This is a machine designed by intelligence and built with purpose. And that machine is exactly 24 days away from demonstrating its capabilities beyond any possible doubt during the Jupiter encounter. Pay very close attention to what happens in the coming weeks. Watch for additional observations and analysis. Watch for the Jupiter flyby on March 16th. Watch carefully for how various institutions and officials respond to that encounter. Because we are collectively witnessing something that happens perhaps once in the entire history of a technological civilization. The moment when we discover definitively that we are not alone in the universe. The moment when we realize that something designed and built by non-human intelligence has traveled across interstellar space to visit our solar system. And the moment when we finally see clearly what is inside that visitor. February 20th, 2026, the day humanity looked inside 3i Atlas and saw the truth, and everything changed.